Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, August 6th, 2020. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. Well, this week, something different. You may remember an episode from back in 2013 with my friend Alan that I called The Flip Side. Alan, not his real name, had just come out of the hospital after nearly dying from acute pancreatitis. This happened because he was a longtime chronic alcoholic and, ironically, tried to quit cold turkey. Well, a few weeks ago, I got a startling email from our longtime friend Doug Warzinski. He revealed to me that he had been struggling with alcohol addiction for some time and had finally reached a crisis point himself where he decided to seek help and turn his life around. Needless to say, I was shocked. I've always seen Doug as a sensible, solid individual, but even sensible, solid individuals can become a victim of this disease. In that email, Doug suggested that his story would be appropriate for this show. I agreed. Let's begin by saying Doug speaks for himself and not for any organization or other entity. Doug Warzinski, welcome back to Basic Brewing Radio.
James Spencer, it's always a pleasure to hear your voice.
Yeah, it's great to hear yours. I looked up in the archives, and you and I have been friends for a dozen years.
Nice.
It seems like. Or not seems like, it is. We started talking back when you were just a youngster.
Yeah.
About ready to graduate law school and trying to get homebrewing legalized in your state of Utah, which you successfully did. And then
indeed.
And we've met up over the years. I even went to your house one time when an unnamed airline stranded us as a family in Salt Lake City. You rescued us and took us to your home and cooked us supper, and we had a grand old time. So I feel like I know you pretty well. And you wrote me a couple days ago. And it kind of knocked the wind out of my sails. I was completely surprised. But you are taking a new course in your life. And I'll let you sort of lead this conversation. And you volunteered. In fact, you brought it up. You offered your story as an episode here on Basic Brewing Radio. I would not ask you otherwise. But you have a story to tell. What's going on?
Well, my relationship with alcohol has changed. I enjoyed homebrewing for a very long time. But, I eventually started falling away from the hobby, and my alcohol consumption changed, not for the better. And frankly, it started to interfere with day-to-day life, and it became a problem. And the problem was I ignored it and just kind of was living my life, and it wasn't a healthy way to go. And eventually, my alcohol consumption reached a crisis point, and I needed to seek treatment. Frankly, I was hospitalized and had to do detox and some sober living, and I am now, as I think I'm about 47 days sober, and I'm at a point in my life where I will not be able to drink any alcohol ever again.
Well, congratulations on your sobriety, and congratulations on recognizing that step needed to be taken. And one reason why I say it knocked the wind out of my sails, it surprised me because you seem to be a very responsible and intelligent and stable individual, and in my mind, you're not a party guy. You're not a reckless human being. But yet here we are. How do you explain that? Or am I missing that character? Am I completely mischaracterizing you?
No, that's a flattering and largely accurate description of my lifestyle. Married, a couple of kids, house in the suburbs, professional career. But this disease, frankly, can hit anybody. People have their own risk factors. There's some alcoholism in my family, and my siblings and I have always been very conscious of our alcohol consumption. And, for a long time, call it holding the tiger by the tail, but I believed that my, involvement in homebrewing contributed to my responsible alcohol consumption. The patience associated with crafting and brewing and aging and bottling and conditioning and all these things that come along with the hobby requires patience and thoughtfulness. And for a very long time, it was just that. It was a responsible, fun hobby. And I definitely don't blame, homebrewing for my increased alcohol consumption. It's actually quite the opposite. It wasn't until I started falling away from the hobby that my drinking habits got out of hand. But this disease can absolutely hit anybody. Even if you have prior risk factors or not, it's just some people, whether it's through genetics or nature or nurture, who knows, a combination of both maybe, but it definitely hit me hard, and it took a toll on my body and my life and my mental well-being, and it affected my family, my immediate family, my relationships with my friends, and it was unmanageable. I was doing crazy stuff to try and ignore the underlying problem. I, at one point, downloaded an app on my phone that had root access to my phone so that I could lock the phone for certain periods of time when I knew I would be drinking, so that I could not drunk text, because
Wow.
my drunk texting was out of hand.
Wow.
So talk about managing a symptom rather than the underlying cause. It just kind of went on that way for a long time. And then of course, COVID hit, and I've been working from home for months on end. And that, created perhaps the perfect incubator to let what was already a problematic drinking habit turn into something catastrophic.
It's something that I struggle with in our approach to this program, because I revealed on the show, I think during the conversation with my friend Alan, who we called him Alan, that's not his name, but I think it was 6 years ago when he almost died from alcohol abuse. Literally, he was in the hospital with acute pancreatitis, and was in the emergency room and in the ICU, and he came very, very close to dying. So there's that, and then the fact that I lost a brother to drunk driving when I was 7 years old. So from a young age, I've known the dangers of alcohol abuse, and so in this program and doing this whole venture, I am completely aware that we are promoting the use of a potentially dangerous drug, and so that's something that I struggle with. How we present ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We get goofy and tipsy every now and then, but I hope that we don't present ourselves in a way that that we're sloppy or promote irresponsible behavior. But enough about me. I don't know how I got me into this, but
well, I'm sorry to hear about your losses. I mean, those are tragic, and it is there is definitely that dark side of alcohol that brings pain and loss to people's lives. But to your point about homebrewing, I think it is itself a responsible hobby. In the years that I've known you and the countless episodes that I've listened to, it's always been about responsible drinking. I think the hobby itself lends itself to responsible alcohol consumption, and by the virtue of the diligence associated with engaging in the hobby, I think it is a well managed social thing. I really enjoyed all the years of the fellowship associated with homebrewers, going to homebrewing conferences and meeting people from all over the world, literally, and having this immediate camaraderie. Two strangers can have an awkward time starting a conversation right up until you talk about yeast propagation, and suddenly you're the best friends. So it's a great hobby, and alcohol has its role in life and in the world, and I don't begrudge any of that. This has really been a personal struggle and journey of my own, and I lay blame nowhere other than my inability to manage this and having to make a decision that was important for my health, my both mental and physical, and for the betterment of my family.
And all my comments were not to try to get us off the hook by any means, of our responsibility, to relieve us of any responsibility. But what was the course? I mean, how did you get off I mean, and please, if you don't feel comfortable in talking about any aspect of this, you can change the subject or say that you don't want to go that way. But I assume that the reason that you're here is to help other people. So what was the bad course or the bad switch in the railroad that got you off the course?
Did you know that an unladen coconut or unladen swallow can carry a coconut? No, it's all good. So the course essentially was, the problem escalated to a point where it could no longer be ignored. I had my crisis day that involved, my wife and, finding me just not in good shape whatsoever. And I recognized that it was sort of the end, for alcohol. It was, I had tried to stop on my own several times, suffered through withdrawals, being too shaky to type a password on a computer, and getting to the point where, my wife said, you need help, we need help. She couldn't help me on her own. So I reached out. To my siblings and told them, and they were very, very sympathetic, knowing full well what our family history was, and they got me into treatment as soon as humanly possible, and so I was in the hospital for a number of days, and then from there, I went into a treatment center, and there we started attending AA meetings remotely. Most everything is Zoom based these days, which has its ups and its downs. But I was, away from home for 6 weeks probably.
Wow.
And when I came home, I had to reintegrate into my house and my family, my life. But that involves, a continuing care plan, which includes, making sure my mental health is on point and being monitored, and attending meetings, and finding, a new fellowship. Not that I've turned my back or nose up at anyone. I have, my home brewing friends are still my friends, but there is a comparable fellowship associated with, attending Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. And that helps support my recovery.
Did your relationship with alcohol go beyond beer?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Not saying that you can't be an alcoholic and just drink beer,
right.
But, just out of morbid curiosity.
No, I think that, when my drinking became problematic, I almost exclusively was drinking hard liquor. Rarely, was I having a beer anymore. Eventually it became not about enjoying it anymore, but just sort of satiating this cycle that I was stuck in for a long time. And so it was, consuming completely irresponsible amounts of vodka and, occasionally wine, but, rarely was wine fast enough. So it was usually, the hard stuff.
Wow. Even after nearly dying, it's not enough to to sometimes incentivize people to stay away from it. What are your? I mean, I assume that you are taking steps to make sure that doesn't happen to you.
Sure. And that's kind of one of the advantages of getting into sort of a treatment situation where you're you're addressing the direct problem of alcohol consumption, but you're also trying to change the way you approach, life in general. What are the underlying causes? What is it that you're trying to do, run away from, or go towards when you're consuming alcohol? And walk away with a management plan, a relapse prevention plan, and even a relapse plan. So you can put, all these layers of protection between you and a relapse. So there's medications out there that help. There are, counseling and ongoing fellowships and having a community that's supportive. These are all separate layers in these protections. And that's designed to give you increase your chances of staying sober and avoiding a relapse. And then, as scary as it sounds, there's even a plan associated with dealing with a relapse. What are you going to do if you find yourself having made a slip? And I've got a plan for that too, and how not to drive the problem underground, and make it worse, but to readdress it and get back on the straight and narrow. All these things are important, but it all starts with the first step, which is sort of acknowledging that I had a problem and I needed help. And sheer willpower alone was not going to cut it. I had reasonable bouts of sobriety that I had thought it would stick, but it wasn't until I was really willing to accept the fact that I needed better and broader support that I feel like this is and granted I'm less than 2 months out, but this is measurably and it feels different than prior attempts. There's a term kicked around in the sober community called dry drunk, where someone can simply abstain from alcohol but not address any of the underlying issues. And at that point, they're not really, they're not setting themselves up for success. I think the key is to, yes, abstinence is the first thing. Sobriety is the key, but addressing the underlying causes that may be whatever they are in individual circumstances is a very important aspect of maintaining long-term sobriety.
And physically, I mean, there's emotionally and there's mentally, but then physically, if you are like Alan was, he was so addicted that his body's chemistry had changed. And I'm not a doctor, nor do I play one on TV, but he made the effort to quit, and he quit cold turkey, and it nearly killed him. I mean, that's very dangerous. It caused acute pancreatitis, and he literally nearly died trying to do the right thing. Yeah. So a lot of people don't realize that if you are that far deep, you really shouldn't try to do it yourself physically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an interesting fact to know that alcohol is in a surprisingly small group of substances that can kill you when you're trying to withdraw from it. Blood pressure goes up, heart rate goes up, complications with liver, kidney. You can go throw yourselves into, there's definitely shakes, but then there's the next level of delirium tremens where you can start having visual and auditory hallucinations. So a severe case of withdrawal is absolutely life-threatening. And seeking medical help under those circumstances, they have medications that will essentially help manage the symptoms, and they can taper you down to a point where you can successfully and safely get off alcohol without suffering through that kind of experience.
A lot of, after Alan's experience, I became acutely aware of a lot of things, and the amount of that we're surrounded by alcohol in everyday life, even if you're not a drinker, every billboard, advertisement, on TV, and people going out to drink, going out to eat. It's everywhere.
I imagine my surprise. The last couple of weeks. I live in Utah, and I've always sort of had this mentality that, well, alcohol is so heavily regulated that it's, people complain that it's hard to get a drink in Utah, which is not necessarily true, but it's definitely the reputation we have. And then to just like engage in everyday life, and I'm like, man, this stuff is everywhere. It's not. It's not simply a matter of avoiding, the beer aisle in the grocery store. I mean, even in the grocery store, it's on end caps, and billboards are everywhere, and radio advertisements, and it surprised me even in my Facebook feed, scrolling through, and I was like, man, I had not realized I had subscribed and followed so many breweries.
Yeah, I was going to say, you don't want to see my Twitter feed and Instagram. And you have to search to find a non-alcohol or non-beer thing.
Yeah.
But there's also the in addition to the commercialism and the exposure in that way. There's a certain normalization among a group of friends.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on who you're friends with.
Sure.
It seems like it's not like, do you want to go out and get a soft drink? It's, you want to go out and get a beer. You want to, the beer or alcohol, cocktail, whatever is the excuse to get together.
Sure.
And so there is sort of an enabling in that way. And there is when I was in college, I was among a group of friends where, it was not abnormal, let's say, to get so sick. Drink so much that at the end of the evening you had to throw up, and you would get sick, and it was like, party fatality or whatever, or party casualty, whatever. But so that's so there's a normalization there, and that should be a red flag. But among that young group or those young groups, it was kind of almost like a badge of honor.
Yeah.
So there are certain relationships and there are certain signals that we should be interpreting as warning signs that we either dismiss or misinterpret.
Sure. Yeah, I think that, you can definitely have a social group that reinforces that. Certainly, in my college years, I definitely overindulged, and, my capacity to consume large amounts of alcohol became sort of my calling card. I built a relationship and a reputation around it. And that definitely distracts or blinds people from the issue that maybe there's a drinking problem at hand. And the other side of that coin is true as well. Once you decide to stop drinking, you need to reevaluate your relationships. And, they say people, places, even times of day, can be triggers for people when they're trying to stay sober. And that is true. And this is, my own personal experience. I feel like generationally, yes, people tend to prefer to remain anonymous for their drinking problem and their sobriety. And I can appreciate that on a professional level, that they don't want that to become something like a Google footprint issue for them. But I think socially, I find that the best way to re-engage in my friendships in society is to be really rather open about it. This conversation being evidence of it. I think that, if drinking to excess is normalized, I think that it can be abstinence can be normalized, and just not make it weird. I am totally fine discussing this with my friends and not make it something where they have to tiptoe or feel like they need to walk on eggshells around me because I'm abstaining. I'm not attempting to impose my lifestyle, and I wouldn't expect people to behave differently. I do need to be careful about what types of things might, be a trigger or be a difficult situation for me to be in. But I find that discussing it and just being rather open, and it's good for my own recovery. The more I normalize it, and and don't feel like it's something that is, a secret or needs to be hidden. I think that, the less, particularly for the alcoholics that I've known, having anything be hidden or not discussed is a problem waiting to happen. So, that's kind of the purpose of going to the meetings is, to be able to discuss these things openly. But, I think I personally don't think that relying on a single, social group is necessarily the best way to go. I'm not going to create a divide in my life between, my sober support group and then the rest of my associates. I want my day-to-day friends to be able to discuss it with me and not feel uncomfortable associated with, having a drink in front of me and stuff like that. I mean, it's going to come up this weekend. Utah has its Pioneer Day, which they celebrate at least as heartily as Independence Day. And there'll be fireworks aplenty, and the counterculture here, which is increasingly not becoming the counterculture, it's becoming relatively dominant, refers to it as Pioneer Day instead of Pioneer Day. And so, we're going to go out and we're going to see, the family friends that we've had for a long time, and my kids know their kids, and it's, I'm not going to break off relationships with those folks, but it's going to be a fun evening for a lot of people, and I'm just going to have to find a way to manage that. And the best way for me to do that is to be open with my friends, and most of them know at this point that I'll be abstaining, and they won't offer, I won't ask for a beverage, and they can carry themselves as they wish and have a nice evening.
And it seems to me that if you've had this as your hobby for an unhealthy hobby for the past however long, you or at least you think probably that you're really good at hiding things, and hiding things is probably not the thing that you should be continuing to do. No.
It's funny. Relatively funny. I was, yeah. I got into the habit of trying to hide, the mere fact of my consumption, and certainly to a much greater extent the amount of the consumption from friends and my own wife in my own house. But one learns in recovery that I wasn't as clever as I thought I was, and so what I thought I was hiding was not necessarily as successful as I thought, and it was just creating an unspoken stress in my household. Hiding behaviors of any sort is just not healthy, I think.
So what do you see yourself? I mean, it seems like to me that, you're young in the program, but it seems to me that you would make an excellent sponsor. Is that something that's on your list of things to do?
Someday, there are in AA that people are familiar with, the 12-step program. And the 12th step is actually reaching out and helping others. Culturally, the expectation is that you kind of go through all the steps. You don't have to go through them all in the same order. Obviously, this would count something as, 12 stepping behaviors is discussing my own recovery. But they usually say about a year and complete the steps to be a sponsor. That's not to say that, I can't, offer guidance to folks and help people get in touch with meetings and stuff like that. And when the time comes, I absolutely, intend on being available as a sponsor. I have a sponsor now, and even after you've completed your year and your 12 steps and all that sort of thing, people usually maintain a relationship with their sponsor because it's just somebody that you can call and talk to. They're just the way that the steps are organized. You just have somebody that you can say all the terrible things to and get it off your conscience, and you don't necessarily have to, publicize, some of the terrible things that you want to get off your chest associated with your substance use. But it's, sponsorship is a great thing. I've shopped around a little bit. It was tricky in the COVID era with meeting people via Zoom only, but finding somebody that you can talk to and that sees, recovery in a similar way that you do is important. I will say that one of the things that I was very apprehensive about in having any affiliation with AA was that my conception of a higher power is not, on firm religion grounds. And, I kind of struggled with that because I'd heard, oh gosh, you've got to accept the higher power, this kind of thing. And what's interesting is that, there's this whole notion that it's a higher power as you understand it, right? So it can be anything. I've got a friend whose higher power is he talks to trees. He goes out in nature, and some people just use, the fellowship of AA as their higher power. There's no prerequisite to have a relationship with capital G God. So that was a major game changer for me in terms of my ability to approach a program like that, because my perception, particularly in Utah, was that it was going to be a big Bible thumping experience. And that was a big barrier to entry to me. But fortunately, I met the right folks, and they kind of helped me interpret the Alcoholics Anonymous book in a way that worked for me, and it's been effective.
Yeah, and I think if you don't find the right group, or if you go to a meeting and it's not the right group, go to another one. That's what I've heard. And there's some meetings that are kind of the catch-all that the judge sends all the drunk drivers to, and those are probably not the ones to go to, because there are people in there that are just waiting for their slip of paper to be signed, and they're not in there for the right reasons. And this is all, I've never been to a meeting, so this is all just me rehashing or repeating what I've heard from other people. Does that ring true?
Yeah, I think meetings themselves, I have not seen as much. I mean, there's definitely an element where people can sign off on somebody's slip that needs, to have proof for the judge. I think in the certain types of recovery situations, there are people that are there rather against their will, and that was, you can be awkward. They have things called intensive outpatient programs where basically you can work during the day, but for 3 hours every evening you're supposed to sit and do counseling. And from what I gather, that's where some of the more begrudging folks tend to be ordered to. But in terms of actual AA meetings, this is an interesting time in the sense that it's a challenge to try and get sober when we're all quarantined and cloistered. But the other side of the coin is that there's meetings all over the planet. And, it's as easy to make friends in an AA meeting as it is to make friends at a homebrewing conference. And you can log into Zoom meetings all over the planet, and I've done a couple different times. I have a budding friendship with some kooky dude out in Australia who happens to enjoy logging into one of the stateside-based meetings, and it's pretty interesting. So you definitely can shop around for your home group. There's websites aplenty. There's local ones that I can zoom into. There are global ones I can zoom into, and they all have their own themes. They've got men's only, women's only, LGBTQ friendly ones. Just about anything you can imagine, and you can find your own little special interest AA meeting, and until you settle in on some ones that you like. But one of the challenges that they'll put out there is to try and attend a certain number of meetings in your first 90 days of sobriety, and it sounded like a tall order at the time. It's feeling easier now, but I think it's greatly enabled by this whole Zoom-based concept. Because I can hop on whenever. I mean, literally any hour of the day, there's one starting, and you hop in there and you see a new group of people and you hear stories that you can relate to and share your own if you're up to it. And it's a very powerful sharing experience and learning experience.
So maybe there is something good to come out of all this stuff.
We adapt.
Well, Doug, I appreciate your candor and your bravery, and I hope that we'll be more in touch now than we have been lately. Because
I am bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. I'm doing pretty good these days.
I like you a lot. I think you're a good guy, and you're fun to talk to, and somebody I admire. So
Appreciate that.
I wish you the best of luck, and you've got a wonderful family, and I'm sure that they appreciate your efforts.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, they appreciate having me around. We've done a lot of fishing lately, and have really kind of come together as a family. So it's been really great.
Take care, Doug.
Thanks, you as well.
Well, many thanks again to Doug for being generous and brave enough to share his story. If my math is correct, as I record this, Doug is 60 days sober. And I hope it's the first 60 days of many, many wonderful days ahead with his terrific family. You know where to find us on the social media stuff. Look for Basic Brewing. You can find me on email, james@basicbrewing.com. And, of course, look for us next week as we travel down the road. Stay well, everybody, and stay tuned. So long.